Okay, so it's time for our.
Oh boy, I try to chew up as much as I could on that one.
Yeah,
I left you 4 minutes.
Got 4 minutes.
Okay.
Not too bad on you. So this is the time of our show where we throw questions to each other that we're not expecting. So this may be a little off the wall, but
okay.
Okay, so within the last year or so, we've had Brexit.
Mm-hmm.
We've had the election of Donald Trump. And just recently in France, Emmanuel Macron and Marine Le Pen, which was not a close election, but the Nationalist Party did get has grown in strength quite a bit in France. So the three things in common with those is that they're kind of nationalist in origin. I think for all of those, big nationalist component going on in all three of those things. Now, and the way I look at nationalism in let's say broader terms is it's all about us. Okay, it's all about bring that focus inward. So in this case, in the case of a country, look at the country, forget about what's going on, very simplified, forget about what's going on outside, concentrate on us. What do we need to do for us? Let's kind of build a hedge around us and focus inward. Very simplified, but I'm simplifying that for a reason. Could you take that same idea, or is that idea, do you think, now migrating into the workplace in terms of management or in the terms of the way companies operate? Is there or has there been a return to a focus inward? Forget about working with our local, environments or, being nice to our suppliers. It's all bottom line, bring it inward. What's important is us, and we're not going to, forget about this touchy-feely partnership kind of stuff going on with everybody outside the company.
Well, it's always been that way. I mean, I think for a for-profit company, it's always been that way because a company is analogous to a living organism. I mean, it does what it needs to do. It eats and grows. It does what it needs to do to survive and grow, especially if you have shareholders. But
do you think the current world environment, which seems to be, we're seeing a lot of nationalism all across the world, do you think that is causing what you're talking about, where it's always been that way in the work, to strengthen, to go more that direction, or are they just kind of two separate things? They're not really influencing each other?
They're fairly separate because they're different ends. I mean, citizens of a nation and employees of an organization are different things. They have different rights, they have different responsibilities. But I think that the way it is impacting it is in the political choices that those governments make. Trump in America is making very distinct choices to say, keep your jobs here. So that would tend to make these companies be more inwardly focused, I think. The problem with that is it's not always what's best for the companies. You look at like a Carrier or Ford or some of these other companies that are at least making steps towards keeping jobs here. They may be sacrificing in the short term some financial benefits of being in Mexico or somewhere else. But they are making the decision that it's better for them in the long term for PR or whatever it may be, to keep, or tax breaks, to keep the jobs here in the United States. But I think companies are always going to do what's best just for them. And their partners, and their close partners in the supply chains. So I think it is kind of a false comparative. I do think that it's different for nations versus corporations. For one thing, corporations are multinational, many of them too. I mean, so they're going to have different ideas depending on what their company, what their business is, as opposed to where they operate. I think that those are different things. It's a complicated issue. I mean, what's going on, I think, with nationalism now is a wave, and these waves happen. But I think in my opinion, the general tenor of history is towards more of a globalism. Maybe that makes me a globalist, and Steve Bannon somewhere is watching this and saying, I'm going to get that guy.
I'm going to get that guy.
But I mean, it's globalism is the trend. I mean, has been the long-term trend for decades, if not centuries now. And I mean, for nations, I think, who are running against that stream are going to eventually be brought back, I think, brought back into line. Companies, I think, have always been out for themselves. Like I say, I don't think that there's really it's a fair comparison.
Okay, okay. And actually, that was my whole question. Is that so? In your opinion, what's going on? Let's say politically, within countries is kind of a separate thing. I mean, it may affect taxes.
It's just how it affects that
sort of stuff. But in terms of how a company decides it's going to run itself or manage itself, it's kind of like let those politicians do or have their whatever, and we're going to do things the way we've always
Again, as you say, with taxes and tariffs and the
stuff.
political stuff that's imposed, regulations or the lack of regulations, the political will that's imposed on those companies from above will change their perspectives. But they're in their DNA. I think they're always going to be in it for themselves because that's just the way it's set up.
What about in terms of, I don't know we're running over here, but one thought that just came to me is what about in terms of hiring practices? I mean, if part of nationalism is, we got to keep, for lack of a better, keep the foreigners out, United States jobs for United States workers, and again, aside from regulations, do you think management and HR people are going to be going, well, yeah, I want Americans first and working for our company. I don't want to hire somebody from Canada.
Well, I mean, I forget the name of it, but the visa program that has been so much in the news right now. H-1A. With these highly educated, workers from outside the United States coming in, that's actually the opposite of that, where these countries are advocating to let us bring these workers in. Again, but it's for themselves. I mean, the companies are in it for themselves. I think the companies will bend to the will of the governments when it benefits them in terms of taxes, avoiding tariffs, avoiding regulations. But they're in it for themselves. Where I think governments have much more complex stakeholders that they need to accommodate. And I think, just my opinion, I think governments also need to accommodate people that are not citizens in a certain way. I mean, I think about myself as a human who's a citizen of the world. I'm an American, but I mean, I think a lot of people think like, well, we should be world citizens, Again, I'm a globalist, right? People are just probably throwing stuff in their computer right now. What is he talking about? But I mean, there's a lot of people who believe that, believe that you need to be a part of the world and you need to be engaged with the world. And it benefits America. We've seen it. I mean, I've studied history enough to know that you look at periods of time where America didn't engage so much in the world, before the First World War, before the Second World War. Those were periods of time where the country wasn't as stable. Didn't have as many people coming in to a certain extent because there was, restrictions on immigrations, especially after the first decade of the 20th century. Anyway, it's complicated issues, but the bottom line is there is I think a very significant difference between the way governments have to operate and the way that corporations have to operate.
All right.